but we need y'all to do this work, to deal with mental health and understanding what's going on with our minds and emotions and trauma. But yeah, we still don't have the amount of people that we need in this work, Marshawn.
Okay. Thank you for the work that you're doing in our community. Speaking of thankful for work done in the community, I want to move to Ashley Thomas with Stand for Children. This is a parent advocacy group that is national, but also is operating here locally. Ashley, can you tell us a little bit more about Stand for Children and your work?
Yes, and thank you, Marshawn, once again for you all even just welcoming us to be part of the panel. So we are a education advocacy organization. We work with families, parents, grandparents, anyone raising children in this time frame or engaging with children in this time frame. We want to make sure that they are empowered to understand what their rights are and what their role is as being that first and most important teacher in the home. So that is what we're normally doing, and also making sure that the babies are on track to graduate from high school and being prepared for the world, whether or not that's a technical program, college, the military, whatever that looks like for them, being prepared for the world. And so that's us.
All right. So knowledge is power, and we definitely want to empower our families today. Stand for Children did some surveying and some research. Can you tell us like some of the findings that you did? I think you did some research or some surveys related to COVID-19 and the experience with that. Can you talk a little bit about that, Ashley?
Absolutely. So going back to what Ashley Virden mentioned is I think anyone who's actually doing effective work and quality work around parent engagement, they should always go to the people. The UNCF report a few years ago called Done to Us, Not With Us is one that I always reference when we're talking about how are we bringing the right things to what the people want and not just leading saying, hey, you need this, right? So our first thing we thought about was, hey, we need to actually go to the families. We have a base of over 2,800 parents that we just have names and numbers for. Some of them have moved, some of them in Indy, but majority of them all within the state of Indiana. And we said, we want to call them all and check in on them, doing a well check. And you might have noticed some of the articles around our well checks. Some parents were like, oh my God, like someone's calling me just saying, how are you doing? That was just so important to them. But while we were surveying and while we were well checking, we wanted to ask them, like, what are your needs right now? And we had a list of things from our strong parent leaders that we were like, okay, these are probably going to be the things that these parents are going to mention. But we want them to say, like, even if it's something different that we're not thinking of, what is it that you need right now? And the top three things that came from those results were they wanted more help with academic learning. They were really concerned that they had to trust in themselves to be able to conduct their child's education at home. Even with the help and support of teachers, they are nervous. Also, when it comes to internet and technology, they were like, well, hey, I only have a phone. I only have a hotspot. I know that's not going to suffice for months of education. And they're really concerned about the fact that they don't have tablets and laptops and internet access. That became a really big thing in that bucket too. Internet access for some of our families, like our Vitas of the world. She's a parent that we've been working with that pretty much said like, hey, I owe a bill to my only internet provider in my community, and I need to be able to help my child, but yeah, I can't access her learning because they're telling me I have to pay this past due bill. And so what are those barriers that the parents are going through? And we wanted to know that, to know what our role looks like right now. Again, done to us, not with us. We want to be standing alongside with parents. And so those are some of those things. So our results were pretty clear on what our next moves needed to be. But one of the things I haven't mentioned is food. That was our number one reason. Food, we know that none of our babies are ever going to learn, even on a regular day, non-COVID season. If there's a lack of food, a child coming to school hungry, not having access to food for dinner, didn't eat last night, parent not having access to those resources, that's a big thing. So we decided that we wanted to work off of what those parents' top concerns were and figure out what we were going to do about it. And I'll talk about it a little bit later.
Thank you for that. That was very impactful. And one of the things I think I'm learning is just going through this experience myself. My son uses technology at school, but that doesn't mean that he knows how to use it at home. And so we're spending a little bit of time trying to figure out how to navigate through that. I want to pull in the school leader here, Mariama. So COVID-19 hit quick, and it was not necessarily consideration when you were planning for the school year this year. You really couldn't, see that coming. How are you thinking about the fall, and what do you wish you could tell parents now but can't right now because you just don't know?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly hit quickly. I mean, it was March the 12th, and we were told in that evening we couldn't come back to school. So we literally, even in this period, had to go from a brick and mortar building to a remote school in 2 weeks. So while it's been quick, we've learned a lot in this process. And I think as we go into the fall, we are taking with us the lessons learned in this period. So a few things that we saw is that tech support is critical. So when you say remote learning, e-learning, virtual learning, if people don't have access, that is step one. So what we realized is we had to reorganize our school so that we had enough social supports for those families. And so very similar to what Ashley talked about, identifying the needs that families have is where we started. And I share all of that because that leads us into what we can expect for the fall. I think it's more so expect the unexpected. We don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but as schools, we're preparing for a myriad of ways that it could be. Knowing that kids have been out of school for 4 months, we know that when we come back in the fall, whether it be continuing remote, if it's continued remote, we need to learn from what we've done in these last 2 months to make sure that if we start just in a remote setting, that we're equipped for that. And that means listening to parents, getting feedback from families, because they are our critical partners during remote learning. So they are the ones that while we teach 4 days a week and Monday through Thursday, the majority of the time kids are with their parents getting additional support from their families. So we want to make sure that while it's important for kids to be logged on and learning, that parents have the tools that they need to be the partners that are necessary for this. The other thing I would say as we look to the fall, I would tell parents, be patient. Be patient with yourselves, be patient with the schools, because all of us are doing the best we can given the situation. And none of us went to school to be remote learning teachers. And parents didn't become parents thinking they'd be homeschool teachers. It's very important to be patient with ourselves, recognizing that where we are now is something that has been sprung upon us. And then lastly, I'll say is communicate with your school. If something's not working for you, if something needs to be adjusted, we got to hear from you, because we can't see the kids right in front of us, but you're with your child every single day. So those insights from parents are critical, especially in this COVID-19 period, because they are the critical partners that we need to advance student achievement and the success of the kids that we serve.
Thank you for that. One of the other key findings that I've learned from talking to school leaders was you all kind of learned about this at the same time that the parents learned about this. So it wasn't like a situation where you got some information ahead of time and you could prepare even a communication. We all learned the same information at the same time. And then parents came to the school and was like, well, what are y'all going to do about this?
I'm telling you, I got text messages from families before I got official word that school was out. It just, like you said, it came quickly. Okay.
Well, Ashley, Virden, so parents were kind of surprised. It sounds like the school leaders everybody was caught off guard, especially with the school leaders. How are parents responding to COVID-19 based on just your conversations, your interactions? What are you hearing? Has anything kind of surprised you? Any thoughts?
Yes, I have a lot of thoughts about this. We are like what I've been hearing too, and I'm feeling it as well. We are overwhelmed and scared and stressed about the uncertainty surrounding this pandemic. It's just been really tough to manage all the new expectations that have been thrown at us all at one time, like you all just named, from school leaders to the districts to our jobs, and to now e-learning. It's just a lot of things being thrown at us all at once. And not only that, Like you mentioned earlier, Marshawn, we were already experiencing trauma in our communities, and so this pandemic has really like highlighted all of that and amplified it and made things worse. And now, on top of that, we are now grieving both figuratively and literally. And so it's just really just been tough to deal with altogether. So.
Do you think that parents are talking to each other enough? Do you find that they're using their resources or each other as resources enough, or is your sense that parents are just kind of weathering this by themselves?
That's a great question. What I've noticed is, one thing I want to name, it's like Brene Brown states, it's too late. When you need a relationship, it's too late to build one. And just what I've noticed in our community, a lot of parents that attend the same schools, they don't often communicate with each other. So while we have a network of parents, normally we all go to different schools or live in different communities. And so it's just been really hard to lean on each other for support as far as e-learning is concerned, because every school is doing something completely different. They're all using a different platform, whether it's Zoom or Class Dojo. It's like everything is all over the place. So it's while we can lean on each other, because we are relational beings, and I think parents have been able to lean on each other virtually. People are pulling up to each other's houses, waving to each other in the window and supporting each other in that way. And it's been really exciting to see us all come together in that way. However, we have not been able to lean on each other when it comes to this e-learning experience. And then also you have families who have kids who go to several different schools. So could you imagine having to manage 2 or 3 different platforms for 3 or 4 different grade levels? These are people with multiple children. So it's been really rough all around.
So I'm going to move to the pastoral counselor here, Mr. McGuire. This is a stressful time, as has been related by our panelists here. It's a stressful time for everybody, for the schools, for the parents. I'm assuming also for the kids, our scholars. We have essential workers who must work and maybe risk their health. Parents trying to work with and teach their kids, or parents trying to work and teach their kids at the same time. People have lost their jobs. What are some tips for managing stress for parents? What should parents be doing? And also, how can we help our kids with their stress? Like, what should we be looking for? How should we be thinking about that?
So first, let me start off with what we should be doing and how to handle stress. Ashley touched on grieving, which right now we don't really even understand. Most communities don't know how to grieve. You asked the question about communicating. Well, I know, being one of the first African-American therapists here, we don't know how to communicate, so we're definitely not communicating. And you hit on that point where it's too late to start doing that now. So one of my things is just to give those tools, those simple tools. So I want to give one now. Grieving is simply just stating a loss. It's just sharing a loss. So the best thing you could possibly be doing with your partner, with your children, with yourself, is acknowledging how did you feel, creating a safe space. We don't understand that just saying, I feel this way or I feel that way causes you to release stress, and it teaches you how to relate with one another and to share. But when you don't, it builds up, and one of these stages of grieving is anger and rage. We're seeing that all over the country. So when you don't deal with these feelings, it causes you to act out. And so that's what we're seeing, in the community with people. Domestic violence everywhere else actually is declining in places. In Indianapolis, Indiana, it's the same and increasing. So it just speaks to the amount of therapy and the ability to come along people, and that they don't know, how to deal with these issues. So one thing is simply just to share, I feel this way, I feel that way. With your children, it means to create a safe space. Make sure that you take time with your children and simply ask them, how do they feel about what's happening? What is it that they miss? And allow them, don't judge them. Don't think you have to make them feel better. Just allow them to share what it is they're going through. When you relate with them in a healthy way, it teaches them how to have healthy relationships. So, you know, the other thing with parents is, Mariama hit on it. You got to give yourself grace and mercy. All of a sudden, parents are like homeschool teachers and they have to do all this stuff. I think Ashley touched on it, and they're managing different school systems. This system says they're doing this. This system says they're doing this. I want to say hi to my kids because they are master Zoom people right now. They probably can use it better than me. So they're probably on it, having little meetings, 9 and 10 years old. It cracks me up, right? So parents, you have to do this thing called self-care. It means take a bath throughout the day and sit there. Don't do anything. One of the reasons we're dying, you know, based on the economy and some of the things of oppression we've gone through, it's also the lack of knowing how to take care of ourselves, how to eat right, how to exercise. We're so, you know, dependent on working all the time and working so hard. We don't know how to take time and relax. So some of our kids just need to go on a walk, you know, throughout the day and sit down and talk to them. But I cannot emphasize enough the ability to allow your kids to talk about how they feel. The two most important messages I want to end with this that are so important that cause kids to be healthy is, I'm okay, so you're okay, and I want to know how you feel. Those two simple messages cause kids to be healthy and to relate with one another as they grow up in a healthy way.
You said, I'm okay, so you're okay.
Yes.
And I want to know how you feel.
Yes, those two simple messages. You know, what we say sometimes is, I'm okay, but your daddy's crazy, okay? Or I'm okay, I think, but I'm stressed out about this and I'm stressed out about that. And so, you know, sometimes we're bringing things that we should not bring to children, and we don't realize that it's causing them to stress out. They said during 9/11, they kept showing 9/11 happening over and over again, and kids were getting re-traumatized because they were thinking it was happening. We got to also protect our kids from this information about COVID-19. You know, they're going to school, they're not going to school, right? Kids need routine, they need consistency. So before you really know that information, don't share it with them. Wait till you know concrete information to share with your kids.
Can you talk about the importance of routine? I've heard folks talk about that. What does that do for a child, having a routine?
So when you don't have a routine, it causes you to be insecure. And when your situation environment is insecure, it causes you to be anxious. And, you know, that's a part of even what they talk about with ADD and ADHD. It causes you just to be all over the place. As Mariama talked about, like, teachers are masters. They plan a day, right? They have a whole day plan. There's not a whole lot of downtime. So parents right now, all of a sudden, they have to plan a whole new routine out for their children. So routine means they go to bed at a certain time every day. You try your best. Help them to go to bed at a certain time every day. Every day they do, you know, they eat at this time. And then we have a talk at this time. Try just 3 things as a parent. I'm just going to do 3 things to have a routine throughout this day. And you're going to have to give yourself grace and mercy because you're going to mess up, right? You haven't been doing this on a consistent basis, but you just try that, and kids respond to it. They love it. They might even complain about it, but deep down they love that we do this at this time and we do this at this time. And that routine is so important when right now our kids' lives are just kind of like snatched from them and they don't know what's going on. So don't treat this, parents. Do your best to create your own routine within your house. Although you know that you might not be able to do an amazing job as these teachers do, just try to have something on a consistent basis and keep trying, even if you mess up. You know, say, this week I'm going to try it again, or I'm going to do it again. But just try to do 3 things on a consistent time throughout the day, and that causes your kids to be secure in their day and in their environment.
So I'm okay, so you're okay. I want to know how you feel, and routine, because that deals with anxiety and insecurity. This is Marshawn Wally, columnist for I'm Just Saying with the Indianapolis Recorder, and we are talking about equipping parents during COVID-19. I want to go back to Ashley Virden. We've interviewed educators before, and they've talked a lot about grace, and we've been talking about that today. Based on your understanding and your interactions with parents, what do you want educators to understand about how parents are experiencing this new role as their child's at-home school teacher, as best they can kind of situation?
So the biggest thing I want educators to understand now during this pandemic and even moving forward is that, we're parents, and like everyone else, we hold many different titles, but at the end of the day, we're still people, and with those titles, we are like we're assets. I know many parents at my school, we have data analysts, program managers, like all these great parents with all these amazing skills, and we want to be true partners. We care about our kids' education, and we want to be true partners in this, and we want to learn and grow with you. So please bring us along this journey with you all. Reach out to us, ask us, how can we, let us know how we can support you all through all of this. It's just really important that we acknowledge that there's no experts. There's, like we are literally all like experiencing the newness of dealing with the pandemic together. Nobody has it all figured out. And so Mariama mentioned it, Nathaniel mentioned it, Ashley mentioned it, and I've watched you all do great work in the community for a long time, and especially since this pandemic has started. I participated in a mental health chat that you hosted, and it's just been amazing. And I just really want to say that we need to make sure that we are communicating with each other as much as possible, being vulnerable, allowing ourselves to be vulnerable during this time, being honest, having those candid conversations. If you are struggling with keeping up with the schedule that your school has provided you, let your school know.
Yeah.
Advocate for yourself. It's just really important. And so I just want educators again to know that we are with you. We care about our children. We always have, and we always will. We want them to be successful. We don't want them to stop learning. And we want to help as much as we can. So bring us along with you on this journey.
So we are definitely talking about the need for communication and grace and bringing us along for the journey. I'm going to go to Mariama here. We have this situation where parents are trying to be teachers, but we also know that we have this national problem with the achievement gap for students of color. Some folks are calling it the opportunity gap. From a school leader's perspective, can you talk about your expectations for students given the school year, how you're supporting your students right now, maybe what parents should expect, and then we also know that special education, and you have English as a second language as a challenge that you're working through. Can you just help us understand that space?
Yeah, I mean, I think you bring up so many important things there, because what we know for sure is that as we support our scholars, we also have to support our parents equally. And so our expectations, it's a very fine line here, because I think especially in our communities, we can't afford to have low expectations because of COVID-19. And it's very, very important that we communicate in a way that's relational, as you spoke of, Ashley, so that families don't feel like they're being beat down by the school, but they're seeing us hold their kids to high expectations. So our expectation is that kids log on 4 days a week, regardless of exceptionality. So we teach 4 days a week, and we're online for 3 hours every single day. So we've set it up so we provide live direct instruction, but then we also have 2 hours of office hours. So if you're a parent and you're not available because you're working at this time, we do office hours at 9, from 9 to 10. And then we also do it again from 5 to 6. If you can't log on because you only have one device and you have several children, we have the lessons recorded so you can go the next day to watch it. So we're trying to think along the lines of what would I as a parent need, so that we're setting things up so that other parents can be successful. The other part to that is we have an expectation that kids complete work. So we provide a syllabus for all of our kids on Monday, and the work is due by Friday. So there's flexibility. So when you talk about routines, we have some sample schedules that families can use. So we're trying to provide all of the resources, but we don't want to set our own communities up to say it's COVID-19, throw your hands up, we'll see what we can do. We are struggling. So in our struggle, let's communicate with each other. Let's talk about what's working and what's not working so that our kids don't get even further behind, as they likely will, because they're not in spaces that provide those things that our kids need. So with all of that in mind, when we talk about our special education students, our ESL students, and our struggling students, while there are some legal expectations and ramifications for ESL and SPED, we look at all three similarly, because when kids are struggling, whether they have an IEP or not, they need something more. So in addition, for our kids that are struggling, teachers set up appointments to check in with those kids every single week. So for a parent that's working, they tell us what time works best for them, so that we make sure we're not dictating to them when they need to speak to us, but what works for you. Because we want to send a very clear message that we have high expectations, but we're your partners. Help us help you, so that at the end of this, however long this period lasts, at the end you feel like my child benefited, even though they weren't inside of a brick and mortar building, that it wasn't that they were on their own trying to figure it out by themselves. So we have a lot of work to do, but I think parents who have kids with IEPs need to understand that the school is legally responsible for making sure that your child's needs are met during this pandemic. Doesn't mean that it looks exactly the way it did in the building, likely no, but there has to be some type of reconvening so that the supports that your child needs by law with their IEP is met even in a pandemic.
Thank you for that. There's my sense is there's a good chance that this is going to happen again. Maybe in the fall. You already talked about the fall. And so it sounds like we are, putting ourselves in a situation where we might experience a new normal. Maybe it doesn't happen all the time, but this is likely to happen again. And so we need to be having some grace, but also be preparing for, okay, this isn't a one and done kind of situation.
No.
Do you think that's a fair assessment, Mariama?
I think it's a fair assessment. And I think that's why I keep going back to parents communicating, because when this happens again, we're going to be that much better if we hear from families who are directly impacted and our partners in this critical work. So speaking up is exactly what we need families to do. We have a hotline set up so parents can call the hotline. We have an email set up so parents can email. But even if your school doesn't have that, they have a website with the principal's email. Email, communicate, call, whatever it takes. Be heard in this time, so when it happens again, it's better for you all and your family than it has been in this first run.
And I feel like I heard you say, when you communicate, make sure that you understand that you're going to be in a relationship, and that this is a relationship that, long term, at least for the school year, you want to make sure when you're interacting with folks that you're thinking about that, because they can provide a lot of resources for your child. I want to go to Ashley Thomas now, and let's talk a little bit about resources. So Stand for Children, national player, but operating locally here. What resources is Stand for Children deploying to support families during COVID-19? We've talked about some of the challenges. What are some of the resources that are out here?
Yes. So along with what everyone is saying, I mean, they're talking about self-care, they're talking about communication with schools, resources that are needed, communication issues, Nathaniel mentioned. I've just been taking notes here like, whoa, all of this embodies exactly what we've been trying to do to make sure we're moving in that direction with the resources. So we are doing 4 things. So similar to what Mariama mentioned, we also started a hotline to complement what schools are already doing doing with their office hours and their hotlines. So it's an academic help hotline. We have some incredible school leaders and educators that are on there just volunteering their time Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Tuesdays, and Thursdays at 317-560-4600. And just to be a help. And they can be on that line for as long as they need. Some parents get really embarrassed about having to need help. But one of the things that we notice is like the communication and how we communicate with families. Right now, we have to just not like call them and say, hey, do you need this help? We have to dive a little deeper and say, hey, do you or anyone you know or a friend of yours may need help? Because sometimes that makes them feel like, whoa, there are other people in this with me. And so just by us adding that extra language makes them say, yeah, I do actually need that help. And again, so when it comes to the academic hotline, that is 317-560-4600 for the academic hotline. Use it as much, even if you call it now, you can leave a voicemail and they're going to call you back on Monday morning as soon as that shift is up and running. But use every single resource that you have access to. Also, we started workshops, which we're kicking them off this Thursday. I'm really excited to be leading some parent workshops. And I keep saying parent, but I'm saying grandparents are raising kids too. There are a lot of folks that are like non-parents that are raising kids right now. And we've been hearing from them as well. So one of the things that we are doing is we are kicking off a workshop that I have titled A Parent Guide to Self-Care and Surviving Home Learning. And the theme song is I Will Survive, just so y'all know. We're going to start the workshop off with that because therapeutic, and when we talk about counseling and just parents just taking a break and having a space, going back to what Ashley Virden mentioned, going back to what Nathaniel mentioned earlier, we're talking about a lot of things that parents need right now. And so if just because there was a wedge between school and home and parents not connecting with one another before, we don't have the space to just say, well, it's been like this, it's going to stay like this. So how do we become the glue? So Stan has worked to say, how do we become the glue? And one of those ways is we are now offering these Zoom workshops. Parents who don't know each other, they don't have to have kids at the same school. They're going to have a venting post. I have a place where they'll be able to share tips with one another in these workshops. And they just get to say like, hey, I'm stressed. I don't know what to do. And like connecting them to resources and teaching them about self-care, because again, everything that's happening in this time is sticking out like a sore thumb, whether or not it was good, bad, or ugly. So these families are the same families who don't even know what self-care is. They think self-care is like, oh, I'm home with my kids. No, you need time to yourself. Who are you as a woman? Who are you as a man? Like you need to take care of that person, that inner person, alone time, and being able to figure themselves out in this time where we don't even have space. Because I have 3 kids. I don't have time to myself unless I create it. We have to be intentional about it. And so being able to teach parents how to do that, and then going back to also what everyone's been saying, the schedule, we're teaching them this in all of these workshops, because us saying it on sessions like this is not going to be enough for those parents who have struggled with that, who are coming from communities that normally are like, okay, I don't have access to these resources, or I don't know how to find this information, or I can't read. So you're telling me to read with my kid and I can't even read myself. Well, we want to create that space. So how do we create that to say, hey, now you got a venting post and you got a space where you can come and say those things to us, and it's a safe space, and no one, including the school, is not going to call CPS on you for saying you don't have technology. That wedge between school and home cannot exist in this time if our babies are going to succeed. So we want to be able to make sure that these workshops are going to be heavy, and we're going to customize it according to what the parents are having concerns about each week to make it make sense.
You have a lot of activity going on. You have the phone number, you have the Zoom sessions, you have the hotline. One of the things I've learned is, I have multiple master's degrees. One of them is in economics and another one is in public finance, but second grade math is not my gift when they're asking me to solve the same problem multiple ways. And I'm just like, why do I need to do that? And so I think parents are wrestling with this new math and the way they're doing, all these different things. So we are all in that together. Okay. Yes. We are all in that together. And so asking for help is, really about supporting your young scholar, and y'all can learn together. I know I've learned some stuff with my son, and I'm a trained economist. One of the things that you mentioned, I want to make sure that we don't lose sight of our future as we're wrestling with the now. And so one of the deadlines that's coming up and that's kind of been disrupted by COVID-19 has been the 21st Century Scholars Program.
Yes.
That deadline's coming up, I want to say June 30th. There's some eligibility. I think everybody's eligible. Can you talk a little bit more about that, Ashley, and how that program works?
Sure. So for 7th and 8th graders, it's a really critical time for that middle school window for 21st Century Scholarship. And I'm not an expert on it, but there's some incredible leaders that are within IPS that have educated me. So I'm going to share this information. With 21st Century Scholarship, everyone should apply. Even if you say, well, I'm outside of the income range, I can't really do this. Like, no, you should apply even still, because 21st Century Scholarship have more resources outside of just what everyone knows them for, and that's the scholarship, that's the funding, but there's also some additional supports that you would still be able to utilize even if you don't qualify for the financial side of it. So if you have a 7th or 8th grader, please apply, go online, send these text messages from on the screen, get those resources. And then for those who need to know, say for instance, if you don't qualify for the finances right now, but you apply and they decline you for the finances, but by the time your child is graduating from high school, you do qualify. Well, because you submitted that time, the application before the end of your child's 8th grade year, which for some 8th graders is June 30th, you would be able to still qualify for the financial part of it. And a lot of people don't know that, but you should definitely make sure that you're applying.
So you need to be on that list. And so you can text college or Universidad. I think I said that right, Mariama, Universidad, to 404-58. And we want to make sure that everyone applies. The free lunch is a qualifier for being in the program, but the idea is to be in the program, to be in the list, just in case, because we never know. It is a scholarship for in-state schools, 2-year or 4-year. And so that's something that we want to make sure people are not missing out because of COVID-19. That's you text 404-58 to college or Universidad, and you can get on the list. It's we've been talking about our kids, and I want to go back to our pastoral counselor here. So you mentioned earlier kind of how we should protect our kids from some of the news and kind of shield them somewhat. And we also want to know how they feel. One of the questions that I think that just kind of comes up is, how do we know that they understand? And what are we trying to help them understand? This is a, global pandemic. This is the first for everybody, for a lot of people living, unless you're 100 and something. And so this isn't something that happens all the time, yet it has been incredibly disruptive. And so there's a little bit of concern about, not overstating the significance of it, but it has been pretty significant. So how should we navigate that with our kids, and how do we know they understand?
So first with kids, it's understanding what they need versus what we need. Children really just need to know, I'm going to be there for you, right? So they just need an understanding that no matter what you're going through, you have a support system. I'm here to support you. I'm here listening to you. How you know they understand is the theme that everyone's talking about right now so eloquently, and that is communicating. Typically, sometimes we're used to a monologue where we're doing all the talking and we are on a soapbox, or we're preaching, or we're mad. And so we don't know how to cause an environment where it's a dialogue. So when I talked about, when kids are grieving, I understand how you feel. That is, you're trying to find out from them what's going on and how do they feel. And you're just wanting them to communicate to you. you're not necessarily concerned about you communicating to them. So how you know is you create that environment where they become accustomed to sharing things with you, you know, and what's going on. But kids are also resilient in that most of them, what we don't understand, they're online every day anyway. They're always online. Kids don't even get driver's license like they used to. Remember, we were growing up, that's the first thing you did, go get driver's license. They don't even get driver's license like they used to because they're online. They know all their friends. They're connected. They're doing TikTok all day, you know, like they are talking all day online, playing video games more than we are. They're showing us how to get online and do things, right? So, you know, there's a part of them that they're conditioned to sit in the house and be connected with one another. But it's our job really to let them know, like, we understand where you're at and that we're sitting there listening to them. But I really want to emphasize, because we're in the house with them now, that I want parents to kind of look at this as an opportunity to get reconnected with their children. They have to now. It's not an option. You can't even send them nowhere, right? So you have to learn that it is important. You know, it's one thing kids can do math, that they know science, they're winning projects, but what if they still don't know how to relate with one another? There's a lot of violence and craziness going around by really smart and educated people, right? But you can do math all day, but do you know how to communicate with somebody, connect with them, and deal with conflict? You know, so I just really look at this as a time for us to really focus on connecting with our kids and creating a safe environment.
That's so important, creating that safe environment and making sure that, you know, our children, who are our future, are weathering this in the best way, in a healthy way. And what I want to do now, as we continue to talk about how we're equipping parents here, I want to go to Ashley Virden. One of the questions that's actually come up and that I was going to ask you anyway, how do people connect with empowered families? You're doing some interesting work as you are engaging with parents. Can you talk about some of that and some of the activities that maybe a parent connecting with your organization as it develops might be involved in?
Yes, but before I do, one thing, if you're like me, you've been overwhelmed with the amount of resources, but then too excited to see all these organizations step up and share. But to my surprise, well, not really, doesn't surprise me, but a lot of parents are still not hearing about these resources, or people who need these services. They're not hearing about them. And so I want to make sure that everybody watching, please share. Even if you don't need this information, somebody you know needs this information. And anytime anything passes your desk, please pass it along. It's just so important that we are sharing everything we can with our own individual networks. Because pretty much all community workers know that there are still people who are not able to access these resources. And about what Empowered Families is doing, again, we're working alongside parents to really hear their issues and concerns with the school systems, and bringing them to the table to begin to work together to create a shared experience around the issues, so that we can take collective action together on the issues that impact us the most. One of the ways that families can get involved with us is they can join us at one of our house meetings. A house meeting is a great way, a safe space for parents, community members, educators to come together, again, to create a shared experience around those issues, build relationships. Like someone mentioned earlier, relationships are key. And so that we can begin to take collective action together. We're having one this Wednesday, from 2 to 3. That's just one of many. We're on a listening campaign right now. We really want to get to the bottom of what is impacting our community in education, what is impacting us. And so we invite you to join us at one of those house meetings. You can follow us on Facebook, and Twitter at Empowered Fam In. So it's Empowered Fam IN. And there's also a link in the comments for you to sign up to receive more information about our house meetings and our trainings coming up. Again, we need all hands on deck. All hands on deck. You know, it's important to name that organizations don't work together, people work together. So that's why it's important that we continue to come together, communicate with each other so that we can drive the change that we want to see.
So it's Facebook and Twitter that they can connect with you now, and via social media, it is Empowered Fam IN, and they would likely participate in a house meeting, and you have one coming up. Can you tell us real quick when that's happening again and how they would connect, Ashley?
Yes, and also I failed to mention another way that they can connect with us is one-to-one. We love connecting having those one-to-one conversations with parents and community members. And so there will also be a calendar link on our page, on our social media pages, so that people can go in and sign up to spend just about 30, 45 minutes working on building those relationships and discussing the issues, and again, learning and growing from each other. Our first house meeting since this pandemic has started is coming up this Wednesday from 2 to 3. Again, we will be having many, so I really encourage you all to sign up to stay in contact with us so that we can keep you informed on when we're coming together. And again, share this video with as many people as possible. I'm over here taking notes myself. These are just some awesome tips and resources being shared today. And even if you don't need it, somebody you know needs it. And if you want to join us this Wednesday, again, follow us on social media, or you can also email me at avirden, AVIRDEN @themindtrust.org. And I can get you the information to sign up. All of these house meetings are, of course, virtual. So we're going to do this the best we can to make them as relational as possible, but keeping our safety in mind first. But please join us. Again, this is one of many. So sign up so that you can stay connected with us. We need you. We need each other. And you all are working with us to really help shape and build this organization. Like once it officially launches next year in July of 2021, it will be based off of the work we have done together. It will be what we need to see. It will be reflective of what we need to see in our communities. So
it sounds like you are definitely going to the parents, as was mentioned earlier by Ashley Thomas, that you got to go to the parents. I think she mentioned what you mentioned first. Y'all just kind of went back and forth there. So what I want to do now is go to Mariama. We've been talking about parents and students, but I want to give you a chance as a school leader to really speak to policymakers. What do they need to know about how COVID-19 has impacted Global Preparatory Academy or just schools in general? Like, what do you think policymakers need to know?
I think policymakers have to acknowledge what we're all seeing across the nation when it comes to how COVID-19 has impacted communities of color. So as we look at policy that's being made, and even policy that's in place right now, coming off of COVID-19, which is 4 months out of school, out of the building for most of our kids, there's going to be a lot more resources needed for schools that serve primarily students of color. So I'm talking about device support. I'm talking about social emotional supports, food supports, all of those basic needs. So we were struggling before, and the struggle has just gotten that much more intense. And as we think about next year, and already school leaders are thinking about this, what does this mean for iLearn? What does this mean for testing and evaluation and ranking and scoring schools? There has to be acknowledgement that what our schools are dealing with is different than the Carmels and the Brownsburg and the Avons. So to lump us all together and now figure it out and get to the other side, we're going to need more support, and the time factor has to be taken into consideration. So what that looks like in terms of policy, I just don't think they can ignore the fact that it's deeply impacted schools like ours. I would also say policymakers need to do what always has to be done. Speak to school leaders, speak to teachers who are on the front line supporting students' learning. To make policy without talking to the people who are doing the work doesn't make sense. And it's never made sense, but it certainly doesn't make sense now.
So I heard that. What I heard was Mariama say, you know, legislators need to come by the school and come by and say hello, and maybe get some understanding from the school leaders and the teachers. I just wanted to make sure everybody heard that. Yes. So that is an important thing to do from a policymaker perspective. And we also are learning that devices, you know, Chromebooks, iPads, those, you know, that's the 21st century textbook. Really.
And
so
if I could add
essential.
something to what
Mariama
just said on the policymakers, because I think we all have a little piece of our mind that we want to share with them to make sure that also parents are considered. And so one of the things that we have been doing is the same thing, like how do you get these voices together? And especially when we talk about the immediate things that are needed right now when it comes to internet, funding, etc. So we will actually be having a petition to go to our two U.S. senators early next week for parents to be able to jump on there, anyone to jump on there to make sure that we're emailing the powers that be. So when they are passing a COVID-19 bill in Washington, that they are considering the voices. And so if the voices can't be there in person, then the voices will be there via email. So making sure that we are still keeping that advocacy moving. And so, yes, thank you, Mariama, for saying that. I just had to jump in and high five.
Yeah, I was coming to you anyway. So I want to know, how do people connect? I was going to follow up on the policy question because I knew you needed to. There's a method to the madness here. But go ahead and answer the other question that I have for you, which is, how do people connect with Stand for Children? It sounds like you have a petition, but then also you have all these other programs and things of that nature. So can you remind us on how to connect with Stand for Children?
Yes, so we will be launching our petition early next week. So check out our website at stand.org/Indiana. That's stand.org/Indiana. That is also the place that parents can go to for this Thursday, May 7th at 5:30 p.m. We'll be hosting our first Parent Survival, I Will Survive workshop, the Ashley version. I will be facilitating it. So if you can see, I'm very theatrical, but it's very informative. And then also they can reach me by email, which is at athomas@stand.org. Or via phone. And if you leave a voicemail on my office line, we check it regularly, which is 317-759-2639 to be able to reach out to us and just connect with us. So
thank you for that. And before we close, I wanted to go back to our pastoral counselor. How do people, can you talk to us about how people can access mental health services and maybe even help us understand when we need? How do we know we need mental health services? I mean, we're dealing with a traumatic situation right now. How do we know that we need it, and how do we access?
Well, first, that's a great question. Let me just name some of the symptoms that we've normalized that we don't even really know and understand. These are signs we need therapy, or we need to seek out mental health. Feeling agitated, restlessness, fatigue, irritability, tenseness, trouble sleeping, panic attacks, irrational fears, avoiding social situations. This is just a list of some of the things that we're dealing with that sometimes we've normalized, but these are all signs that we need therapy and that it would be extremely helpful. One of the places that I just want to personally talk about is family and community partners. Some of my colleagues, particularly for African Americans, it's just one of those places and practices that's culturally competent. And that's really important because our community sometimes is already nervous or fearful about coming in contact with mental health, but especially when the people that they're talking to don't look like them. There's a lack of trust and sometimes a lack of connection there. Although I'm just an advocate, I don't care what color they are, we need help. We need to talk to somebody. But family and community partners. Also, I encourage people, they have EAP. So right at their job, they will have access to healthcare and they're not even using it. There's money to use it. So I encourage people to make sure they're using EAP. They're using those different resources that they have to seek it out. And then I just want to say, please try it out. Just like, where you need to work out and you need a personal trainer because you have no idea what you're doing when you go to the gym, right? It's like we do things and we just have no idea that there's help and there's resources out there. But primarily when it comes to our mental health, there is no health without mental health, right? You can't enjoy what you have if you don't have mental health. So I'm always just encouraging people to understand that they need to seek it out. I also know that I've never met a person that hasn't been traumatized. So everybody's dealt with trauma. I know as a people, we deal with trauma almost every day. Trauma is just a sudden, disturbing, and distressing experience, right? And if you've ever experienced any trauma, you need therapy. You need to go and talk to somebody. You need to take advantage of it. It's really a privilege to be able to sit down and talk to somebody and share your issues. And it's like your own, let me do it this way for some of us. It's like your own personal pastor. You want to talk to pastor all the time? Your own personal pastor. Sit there, listen to everything you have to say, and help you understand what is going on in your life so that you can be healthy. The last thing I want to personally do to give an example of how to set this environment and for especially parents and people is just give an illustration. So I'm going to illustrate a healthy way to create a safe emotional environment. So Marshawn, Ashley T, Ashley V, Mariama, I love you. Thank you so much for all that you do in this community, all the things that you're doing to share. And I just want you guys to know I need y'all, right? And I'm so thankful to be a part of this community and talk to you guys. And you can say whatever you want to say to me, and I'm not going to judge you. See how good that feels? Did y'all see the smiles come up on people's face?
I know, right?
Yeah.
It just changes the environment, right?
It
The little boys and little girls in y'all was like, you know what? I love you too, Nathan. You know what? When I think about that, right? It is that simple when you're talking to your kids and your family to make sure you're just expressing how you feel, get it out, create that safe environment. And that alone, spiritually, can change everything. You can go through anything, any pandemic, if you have love.
Yes.
Right? I don't know if y'all heard about it, but there's this person called the Son of God or whatever. He said he had this new commandment that we love one another. I know you hardly ever hear about it, but it works. That's what the thing that you need.
Almost got a little sermon in there. Got a little sermon in there. So as we close out, I want to thank all of our panelists for sharing this wonderful information and this empowering conversation on how we can help our parents, how we can help each other, help our children, help ourselves, and resources that were provided, and to give ourselves some grace. I also wanted to remind everyone that 21st Century Scholars is an important program that everyone should apply, whether or not you think you are eligible or not. It is as simple as texting 404-58 and the word college or universidad to that particular text number. And you need to, it'll get you registered by June 30th. It's based on income, but you should still apply anyway because you never know what is going to happen. Today we discussed equipping parents. We may not know every situation that parents are involved with right now, but we hope we provided a resource or a thought you can use to weather COVID-19. It may not hit everyone the same, but we as a community are all in this together. See you next week.